Something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while now is outgrowing art channels. It's a little bit of a sensitive topic. I'm not going to bring up any specific art YouTubers. I think I've spoken about this a few times on stream, but I wanted to address this because I feel like, for one, it's a topic that not a lot of people speak about. And two, it's pretty easy to misunderstand me on this. So I'm gonna have this video where I try to give a very clear explanation. I've found over the last probably like 2 to 3 years that there are several art YouTubers that I really used to enjoy watching as a teenager, whose art is still like 10 to 100 times better than mine and are very great, likable people that I absolutely cannot watch. I find their videos so boring. I find myself clicking not interested when they pop up on recommended. I am just so over it. And my first reaction towards realizing this fact about myself is I was like, okay, maybe I'm starting to develop a little bit of an ego. It can happen. It's definitely happened. This person is still very clearly way better at art than me. So all of their advice must be helpful, and I'm just finding this boring because there's something wrong with me and I'm not getting it, and I need to work harder at that. But upon farther reflection, I don't think that's actually the case. So let me walk you through this. Their art level as an art YouTuber, and even mine if you're watching me, doesn't really determine three of the most important factors when it comes to learning from somebody. Number one is the skill level that they're teaching to. A lot of very popular art YouTubers are teaching to true beginners, and just because you aren't able to quite get a fundamental down doesn't mean that you need to hear that beginner advice over and over again if it's been years. Sometimes it's time to move on to more advanced stuff. To add to this, beginner advice is usually vague. Once you get into intermediate or advanced territory, you start to need really specific advice or advice that focuses more on your mindset rather than just like the generic, oh, don't shade with gray, be sure to shift the hue a little. Yeah, sure, if you're a beginner and you have no idea what you're doing, that's probably helpful. If you're more in intermediate territory, that is not going to prevent you from picking horrible colors. The second important factor is how good of a teacher they are. There were a few instructors I had in college who I looked at their art and I thought it was really phenomenal, but then when it came to teaching the class, I found them to be a little unprofessional and not very good at explaining things at all. I still respect them as artists and as people, but as instructors, I don't know. Just being good at art doesn't make you a good art teacher. I'm sure we've all had that experience in high school or middle school with that one music teacher who is absolutely phenomenal at their instrument or at singing. And then when it comes to teaching the class, they are a maniac. So don't make the mistake of assuming just because someone's good at something, they're a good teacher, or because someone's more intermediate at something, that they're a bad teacher. Because the other example that I'm sure we've all had in the past before is your teacher in school will explain something to you. They're supposed to be the best person at this subject ever, and you absolutely don't understand it. And then that one smart kid sitting next to you who, they might be good at the subject, but obviously they're still learning. They'll just sit down and explain it to you, and you get it in like 5 seconds. So the third important thing when it comes to learning something from someone is if you can actually understand their teaching methods. So I'm sure we all have our own personal preferences when it comes to learning. For me, I like really factual stuff rather than, oh, just feel where the brush stroke is supposed to go, because that's just how my brain works. I feel like it's also important to note here that when teaching to a general audience, if you're not careful, there is also a lot of ableism that goes on. Someone might say, the only way to learn is to study from this book. And maybe it's like a 500-page book with like small text and diagrams that there's just no way you're going to get through for whatever reason. I feel like in some communities, there's a culture around attacking people who can't get through whatever method that their basically guru wants them to get through. because this is the golden method that if you follow it, your art skills will essentially be saved by this guru. I also do want to note though that sometimes it is hard to make things accessible because as small content creators, we just don't have the time or the budget. Let's quickly go over an example of learning from a specific art YouTuber not working for me. A few months ago, I was doing a live stream and I was complaining about having to draw the hands. So a person in chat helpfully suggested that I check out a certain artist tutorial. But what the person didn't know was that I had actually been following this artist for years. I really enjoyed their art, and I had in fact watched that tutorial that they suggested already like 5 times. And I put in time outside of just watching the video to actually draw and follow the exercises. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't get it. It didn't help. Was it my fault? Maybe. It honestly could be. Maybe I should have just put in like 10 more hours doing it and I would have gotten it. But we'll never know that. Was it the artist in question's fault? No. It was a very clear explanation. They made a very good video. So assuming I'm fine and the tutorial's fine, the 2 only possible explanations that it could be are 1, the tutorial just doesn't work for however my brain works, or 2, it was teaching information that might have been helpful, but didn't fix the bigger mistakes that I was looking at in my own art. Something that I've learned as an art YouTuber is at times, people feel like you're really speaking to them directly. But we all know that's not the case at all. Most of the time, art YouTubers address people on a general level, or they imagine a mini version of themselves, or at times, they imagine people that they very firmly disagree with. If you're listening to art YouTubers and you hear the same piece of advice over and over and over again, it is meant to help one of those groups of people, not necessarily you as an individual. At a certain point, to increase your skill, if you're listening to the same advice over and over again, you need to either A, spend more time practicing, or B, switch to a different person who can give you a different explanation. If I tell you to ink better by using cleaner lines 100 times, it is not really going to help you more the 100th time than it did the first time, unless something within yourself has genuinely changed. It can be helpful while learning to hear something multiple times, but after you've heard something like 1,000 times and it's been 3 years, clearly something is not going to work. So let's go over an example of this happening to me personally. Perspective. I used to not understand perspective at all. Basic videos about it did not help, no matter how clear the presenter was, no matter how many graphic elements they threw into their visuals, it just wasn't working. How did I get better at it? My sophomore year of college, I found several more technically focused artists who explain perspective using comparisons to like math and geometry that really revolutionized my ability to understand form. Honestly, I found it really bizarre that I wasn't getting any of these easy, clear explanations on YouTube that were getting millions of views. But my brain was like, math? Algebra? Trigonometry? I totally understand this perspective thing now. Goes to cry in my corner as I try to do more perspective sheets. Anyway, I guess that's what I mean when someone excitedly asks me if I watch a YouTuber, and I'm like, nah, I don't anymore. I've grown past the level where it's really good use of my time to watch certain people's videos, or their explanations just don't work for me. And that's usually no fault on them. Everyone learns differently, and there is no one-size-fits-all approach to learning, as much as school tries to make us feel dumb by thinking there is. If an explanation's not working for you, give it a genuine try, and then move on to somebody else. You might find that's faster than trying to just bash your head against the wall over and over again. Well, back to working on that, which is my sister. If you guys want to support me, be sure to either like my videos, support me on Patreon. Alright, goodbye.